Greetings, dear listeners. Why do artists try to shock us? Is provocation always a good thing? And what are we to make of Kanye West? Today's special guest is Țara Isabella Burton, a novelist and culture critic who we are lucky to count as a regular contributor to Wisdom of Crowds. Her books include Strange Rites, New Religions for a Godless World, and Self-Made, Creating Our Identities from Da Vinci to the Kardashians. She's also published 3 novels. Țara joins Damir and Santiago to discuss her recent essay in Wisdom of Crowds titled The Point of Pissing People Off. It deals with this very question of the role of provocation in art, which is in the air today. Before we get started, a reminder to head on over to wisdomofcrowds.live and consider becoming a paid subscriber if you're not one yet. You'll get access to, among other things, the whole conversation, along with other subscriber-only benefits. And don't forget to give us a like and a review on your favorite podcast app. With all that out of the way, on to the show.
Always got to remember, guys, like when you think it's someone else's fault, it's your fault. No one else is guilty except you.
Yeah.
Always the guilt is personal.
And you're alone in the universe.
Isn't that true?
I don't think we're alone in the universe.
Hold on a second. Let me just, yeah, so look, Țara Isabella Burton, our regular writer at Wisdom of Crowds. Welcome. From Georgia, Tbilisi, of all places. Not the fucking state, the real country. The real Georgia, as they call it, right?
Hey, I'm sure some people do call it that.
I mean, Georgia is fake, the state. That's always been fake. It's not even a real place. I've never been there. I'm not sure it exists.
I've been through the airport. Airport
Yeah.
is real. Can't speak for the
It
rest.
exists. Yeah. Anyway, I'd love to talk to you about your most recent piece for us about I think transgression's a good way to frame the thing. What's happening in DC as we record is there's a big it's Pride weekend, I think, and I lived on 14th Street, and it's going to be a zoo here. Pride cometh before the fall or before the summer. I don't know. But it's again, like the Pride.
Damir workshopped that one probably. Right?
No, I'm not Donald Trump. I don't workshop my material. But it's I mean, it always strikes me how these Pride festivals are themselves some sort of weird mix of an attempt to transgress, but also an attempt to, I don't know, force a kind of like acceptance of diversity as normalcy. It's a weird thing. I've never really thought about it in terms of sort of transgression, how it works. But there's definitely, maybe it's a throwback to an earlier part of, I don't know, gay culture when transgression was a bigger part of it rather than sort of, I don't know, gay marriage and integrating into bourgeois norms or whatever. But anyway, it feels like a good time to just sort of talk about transgression. So I was struck, Țara, in reading your piece. I mean, I guess we're in sort of a transgressive time right now, right? I mean, tell us a little bit about that to sort of get us going. What you're seeing, I guess, in art and culture. We can also talk about politics, I guess, as well. What's going on right now, you think, with all of this stuff?
So I think there's a few different ways to answer that question. I think we are in an era that self-identifies or self-understands as transgressive in a rightward direction. I also think that sort of shortly before that, we were in an era that self-identified as transgressive in a sort of leftward or or progressive direction. And what's interesting to me, and I think we can get into the specifics of left transgression or right transgression or, base transgression or woke transgression or whatever sort of stupid internet names you want to give it. We are roughly in an era where transgression is a marketing tool, but also a very safe and reliable marketing tool, which is to say, sometimes I wonder if transgression exists at all, that we are in a kind of such a kaleidoscopic and fractured media consumer landscape that basically a really good way to make money is to frame yourself as transgressive when you're just thumbing your nose at the other guy and actually selling your books or your likes or what have you to your audience base. And right now, I think it's absolutely true that in the post woke era or the Trump era or Trump 2.0, whatever you want to call it, that the prevailing norm is a kind of anti-woke, self-conscious transgressiveness where like you can be a little racist now and you could use the R word and you can make fun of,
What's
talk
the
about
R
gender
word?
norms again.
What's the R word? You can use it now, right? I'm
I
sorry. I'm joking. Go on.
I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. I want to make life easy for myself.
Republican?
That's it. Very good. Very good, Santi. Save the day. Go on, Tara. Sorry, didn't mean to jump in.
It is fair. I mean, and I think that's a fair point too, which is just there is a sense now that it is thrilling, it is exciting, it is sexy to be able to be anti-woke in whatever way possible. And I think that there's one way of interpreting it, which is now we are in the era of transgression. That's certainly the way that it's being framed. In my article for Wisdom of Crowds, I talked about this new futurist art gallery named after Fiume, the city where Gabriele D'Annunzio had this sort of weird early 20th century dictatorship that would take me way too long to explain. But
let me jump in. Fiume, currently Rijeka in Croatia. Very important.
Thank you.
You wrote a piece for us in at the American Interest way back when about D'Annunzio and Fiume and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah, that was you.
That was me. Yeah,
and
you wrote
here
that.
We are again.
And here we are again.
D'Annunzio.
And it's
almost like
I just it's irritating to me that all of that is constantly Italianate when really it took place in the name Rijeka, which means fiume in Italian. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. Or the Regency of Cornaro. Let's just split the difference. Yeah. But this new art gallery is, it's heterodox.
Split the empire.
It's anti-woke. There's a dark burlesque strut of the Valkyries. Fine. But what's interesting to me, I think, is not that now suddenly transgression is in because, quote unquote, the wokes are destroyed or whatever the sort of current way of framing the cultural moment might be, but rather that actually transgression has been a marketing tool for at least a decade, if not more. Maybe I don't know where we want to sort of start it. Is it Madonna's sort of whole Catholic era? Is that the point at which the things turn? But realistically,
you mean Madonna the singer?
Yes, that one.
For the younger audience, there was once a pop star named Madonna who made her name both by being a good singer and dancer, but largely by transgressing norms, mostly by sexual norms and making fun of the Catholic Church, or not even making fun, really using Catholic symbols.
Well, she called herself Madonna for that reason. And
exactly.
Right? I mean, that was
calling yourself Madonna is huge, especially if you come from an Italian background like she did. Like, I know she's kind of passé now, but it must have been quite a thing for like an American Italian Catholic to launch herself as an artist.
I mean, I was there for that stuff, man. It was wild. It was wild, kiddies. Anyway, but hold on. When was Piss Christ? Do you guys remember that one?
It was the 90s, I think.
That was the 90s?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's longer than a decade, right? I mean, like, I feel like Piss Christ is we should put that in the show notes, exactly what that transgressive bit of art was that was also, I think, like, lit up Americans back then.
Yeah.
That feels
photographed by Andres Serrano, where he collected his urine for a month or so, and then he dipped the crucifix into it, took a picture of it. And it's actually a beautiful thing. If you don't know it's urine, you'll be shocked at how beautiful you'll find the picture to be.
Is it beautiful? Anyway, I mean, it's
Sister
transgression.
Wendy
The whole,
Beckett, famous
the whole
art,
point of it is
art
just sort of
historian,
like,
said that it was a beautiful thing, and she was
but
a
it was
sister.
to tweak, though. It was to tweak. And it, yeah, I mean, anyway, Tara, go on. So it's been going on for, I would say longer than a
And I
decade,
think
right? Like,
the idea, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about the Salon de Refusé in Paris. Like, if you want to go and talk about transgression being some kind of marketing tool, you are going to be hard pressed to find the time when it started. But I think
no,
what is
no.
different is that the sort of very at some point being anti-Catholic, anti-religious, anti-establishment did become kind of lazy and passé because the establishment very much was not synonymous with the Catholic Church, say. That doesn't mean the Catholic Church isn't powerful or that it doesn't have its own power centers. But if you are a young pop star in, 2015 and you want to piss off the Catholic Church, it is not going to have the same results for your career as it had for example, Sinead O'Connor
Right.
in I want to say the 90s, when she ripped up a picture of the Pope on stage. And so I think that there was this long period of time where if you were kind of lazy, but you wanted to present yourself as exciting, bohemian, transgressive, punk even, the thing to do would be to take these pot shots at organized religion, particularly Catholicism, or the straight white male establishment. And I'm thinking of something like I want to say this was 2021, Lil Nas X, the rap star, selling these sort of Satan sneakers that had human blood in them for $666, where it was so clearly an attempt to court controversy, to get the headlines that you would get when someone would get outraged and someone would write a think piece and someone else would write a think piece and everyone would get paid and everyone would get eyeballs. But I think the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, is so diffuse that there wasn't exactly a sort of coalition of, I don't know, concerned Catholic mothers that were actually going to affect Lil Nas X's career. And I think that what's interesting, one way of thinking about the right-wing transgression now, about thinking about the kind of anti-woke humor and the anti-woke media ecosystem, is not that it's transgressive because the age of woke is over, even if it is, but also that there's a kind of consumer base now, the same people who want to buy My Pillows and belong to Truth Social. There is a market for and a kind of more cohesive, coherent market for quote unquote anti-woke transgressive stuff. And so it's not even that it's transgressive at all, but a different direction. It's just there is a market base, and this is capitalizing on that. So I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. There's so many ways to just, I don't know, pull at these strings. Because there's a good chunk of your essay, arguably most of it, talks about the role of transgression in the history of art and how that has played out and, the legitimacy or illegitimacy of it. Is it nihilism? Is it something else? But now what you're talking about here about this marketing thing, it made me think there's something else to sort of pull on. I don't know. I haven't been in New York in a while. I avoid the place, and I certainly have not moved in New York, sort of like arty circles. I do see this sort of stuff that pops up every so often. I even before you wrote about it, I noticed that like that weird procession of the Valkyries or whatever the hell you called it, the strut of the Valkyries, and it's all kind of comedic because these are clearly nerds, not like these are try hard cool kids. It seems like to me. Maybe I'm just old or whatever. Maybe it was always like this, but there's that on the one hand, which seems very performative and like, hey, look at us, we're doing art, almost like in a painful to watch way, and then what's happening in politics? Yeah, sure. Like, there's a lot of stuff there that is performative and everyone gets paid still. But what's different about it is not transgression, it's resentment. And it's like that it's channeling resentment in a way that's not ironic. And I think that's the the part that is, I think, again, nothing's new under the sun. All of this has happened in different like permutations in humanity, but I think that's legitimately different right now, in the sense that at least here in DC, part of it, like there might be some irony in how these people are transgressing, but it comes from a place of like real hatred. That's how I'd put it. You know what I mean? A very authentic hatred, a real authentic dislike, and an authentic joy in negation. So it's not art in a lot of ways. It's very unmediated ugliness is maybe the way I'd put it. I don't know, like either of you guys, like what do you?
But do you think that like Madonna or Andre Serrano had an analogous level of hatred
No.
for?
No.
Why not? Why
I
not?
think it
That's
was more conceptual. It felt more conceptual at the time. I think maybe Piss Christ guy was, but you know what? Like, I mean, he was part of the art scene, and he was doing a thing. I mean, I think it was cheap. I think like the Piss Christ thing was like not great art, but it still was contained with it. Whereas
I don't know if it wasn't great art, by the way.
okay, no, we can
We're still talking about it, and I don't think such a cheap provocation would last as long as it has. I think Madonna still has her name out there just because of the apparatus she has for self-promotion. But even there, who still talks about Madonna, who actually like goes and analyzes like a prayer. Whereas I think Andre Serrano's photo is actually compelling in a weird way.
I mean, those are fair points.
But what you're saying, Damir, is that like the transgression of the Strut of the Valkyries is less this sort of joyful, creative, artistic transgression and more just like resentment.
Here's maybe the bridge though, Tara, and we'll put the essay from the American Interest as well about D'Annunzio, I think, in the show notes, so people can, maybe it was a good way to sort of bone up on that period. I think you did a good job explaining for people who are not sort of aware of it. I mean, what's different about that maybe is closely analogous to it, is this was basically the proto beginnings of fascism in Italy, and D'Annunzio basically goes and sets up a fake government, or a real government, sort of like a mini coup in the city of Fiume, Rijeka today in Croatia, right? And then it sort of becomes this debaucherous bacchanal of a thing. But there's real political power there, which is, I guess, is what I'd say is what's different between artists or these like try-hard artists in Brooklyn right now who are doing these sorts of manifestations of silly echoes of things, is that whatever you want to say about like the postmodernism, the like wild nature of this Trump administration, like how surreal the whole thing is, at the very end of the day, the man is the most powerful human being on the goddamn planet, and that counts for something. So resentment channeled through that is somehow beyond art, and is not artistic in intent. Mm-hmm. In the same way that, D'Annunzio, for better or worse, wielded some sort of real world power, and then all of this sort of crazy stuff happened around him and through him. But it wasn't performative. It was political in a way.
I mean, I don't think I draw the distinction. I don't think I draw the distinction, actually. I mean, I think that something that interests me about D'Annunzio, especially coming, as a background of being a kind of dandy and a poet and a playwright, and then becoming a political figure, is it sort of, and again, how do we define our terms? How do we define our art? But it's the idea that when performance and aesthetic performance does move outside of the bounds of art and into a kind of, you can call it life as art, you can call it art as life, but the real political sphere rather than the artistic sphere. And it does make me sort of think out loud now that what is interesting about transgressive art is that it takes place like within the frame. It takes place within the page or the canvas, or there is a way in which it is contained, which is in dialogue with whatever is depicted or whatever is transgressive, in a way that I don't think you can have transgressive art and you can have aesthetic politics, but you can't have transgressive aesthetic politics, because then you're just like that's just real life.
No, but right. So that's the part. Maybe I mean, and maybe that's the thing that I found so provocative and maybe challenging in your essay is that it's a very fair point. Like it's the transgression in a lot of these things, and maybe we should just rather than speaking abstractly, just maybe point to some things to help listeners. I don't know, get clued in. I there's a truly remarkable short story by the French author Georges Bataille called "The Story of the Eye," which I just remember in my 20s just being again transfixed by it. It's pornographic, but like that doesn't that doesn't really do it justice. It's one of the most transgressive sort of things that I'd ever read back in the 20s. I mean, it provided such a charge, and it wasn't a sexual charge as much as just like a what in what world from what brain is this seeping? But you're right, it is contained to the page, and it's not real, as you say. Like it's not it's bounded. But I just wanted to sort of juxtapose that to something else, which I at the same time I remember both of these like and they're both texts. I guess really did transfix me in my 20s. The other one was there's the opening chapter of Michel Foucault's Discipline and Punish, if you guys remember
Oh yeah,
that,
yeah.
and it just depicts in just absolute gruesome detail, again within the page, within the confines of the page, of an author, Michel Foucault, like basically detailing this, but the hacking apart of and the execution and hacking apart, drawing and quartering of was it an attempted regicide? I forget. I didn't review it before we started recording, but in any case, it is just it's how Foucault opens his grand thesis about how imprisonment and social order and the rest is maintained within by describing in visceral detail the slow killing, execution of this person, first drawn and quartered, branded, and then, because the horses couldn't pull him apart in 4 ways, the executioner comes in with an axe, and the guy's still alive when his just torso's just left and his legs are ripped apart. I remember there's a passage there like the jaw is still moving, he's still alive as he's pulled apart, and all these sorts of things. And so again, not real, it's on the page, but it happened, and it's the fact that it happened that I found just incredibly, again, just exploding of my mind. You know what I mean? Like it's not art. It's real. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I feel though that successful transgression has to be not just saying tidily, here are the limits, and by going over the line, we identify the limits, and then we can ponder the limits.
Yeah.
It's it's to thrust you across the line, put your head across the line in a way that's serious, that's threatening, that is actually disruptive and like fries your brain in some sort of way. And that's, I think, what's different about like what you're talking about, this as marketing, and why I look at these New York fools and sort of like chuckle to myself, because they're not doing anything that's pushing anyone over the line. Like whatchamacallit, like it's the Kanye song, the Heil Hitler stuff. Like, come on, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. React to that a little bit? Like, what?
So
So
that you're saying,
something that's
sorry,
been on
sorry.
my mind is the idea of like transgression as a genre.
Mm,
The same way we think of, comedy as genre and satire and tragedy and what have you. And what's interesting to me about transgression, and I think that, yes, it's true that, we could sit around and come up with a form of transgression and something will transgress it, sure. But that in like like the idea of the transgressive art is doing is something that we can think about as having, yeah, rules or a kind of internal structure where transgression is kind of, it's about the line, it's about finding the line, it's about going over the line, it's about calling attention to the line, whatever the line is. But I think that you can judge trans, or you can judge sounds too harsh. You can assess and critique and understand transgressive art as something that is kind of about and in dialogue with its own limits and the limits of the society that produced it, in a way that can be horrifying, can be interesting, can be boring, can be successful, can be unsuccessful. But it is I think, about finding the edge cases of the society that created it and its own creation. And this is where I think Bataille is so important. Um, and really convinced me, I'm a good Christian realist who likes the true and the beautiful and the good. I am not it does not fit with my personal brand to be really into Bataille. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. I can't,
That's not
Story
true
of
though,
the Eye
Tara. That is
does
not true
make
though,
me
Tara.
want to throw
Your
up.
personal brand is very weird.
Thank you.
Bataille
It's
fits
yeah, I'm
perfectly.
transgressing.
You're
No,
you're
but
like
I,
talking to
Brand.
us from
We know.
Georgia, and not even the state Georgia.
it's
Typical
making your life
American
hard. But
cosmopolitan writer. You need to be in with the people of America if you want to write for us. Just kidding, Tara. No, but just to go back to Damir's point, that before we get to a genre of transgression, I think just like what transgression does for us is put our imagination over the line, as it were, and make us contemplate these brutal things, like what Damir just said, like the execution of the regicide, whatever the hell happens. The Story of an Eye, which I never read because, unlike you guys, I'm
You're,
and
an
you're,
I
elf.
think the story of the
no, but,
regicide is
but
actually a really, really interesting one for precisely what I think
No, but just
transgression
to finish my point,
does.
that
go
yeah, no,
ahead.
but just to finish
I'm
the point
sorry.
though, because what Kanye's song doesn't do is precisely that. He doesn't put us in a new world where you're contemplating something that society has cordoned off and said, "Don't look there." He's just crossing a line, sort of like the way a kid crosses a line, just to break the rules and to piss people off.
Hmm.
And I don't know if like piss Christ. Piss Christ, I think, is an edge case. I think it does actually make you contemplate something, like just the fact that, just like the sheer idea of the incarnation, that God becomes flesh, means that Jesus Christ, urinated as well. So it's a juxtaposing piss and Christ. It makes you contemplate a fact, makes you do something that maybe pious society doesn't let you contemplate. So I think there is really something important to what Damir just said. Um, but but when you talk about, transgression as a genre, it seems to me you're saying, okay, there are a set of works in art and literature that regularly do this, and some do them better than others.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think particularly, and this is where I follow Bataille. So Bataille talks about Bataille when he defines evil and his literature and evil, what he seems to be talking about, or I read him as talking about, is an evil that's not kind of vis-a-vis God so much as vis-a-vis society. Like the evil is very much that which cannot be allowed to stand, and or sorry, versus a sort of good that is, you know, we're gonna let the poets in Plato's Republic because they're gonna promote the values that will make
So
society
when
coherent.
Bataille says evil, does he mean evil the way we mean it?
No.
I think no, no, he
What does
means
it mean?
evil. I think I mean antisocial is what I how I would read it or how I
Right.
would interpret it. And I think that definition of evil is really interesting because what but this he talked about this with reference to Wuthering Heights in particular and the relationship between Kathy and Heathcliff, but that there is a tension. There is always a tension between the individual and society, between what I personally want and what is personally good for me or right for me or even just fulfills my desire and what will sort of net be good for everybody. And I think that it is a profoundly humanistic thing to recognize the limitations of what even the best available just society can put on the deeply felt desires of the individual, where sometimes those desires are not sort of evil in what I would consider the like vis-a-vis before God hurting anyone's sense, but just evil vis-a-vis society. And I think that tension is really interesting. And actually that's why the regicide example I think is so fascinating because it is an example of a horrific kind of ritualistic torture that has to be undertaken in order to make regicide a crime that no one will ever try again. And there is a kind of sense of the sacrifice of this one person for a greater good. And I think the best thing that transgression can do is call attention to the fact that the boundaries of what is necessary socially are like we are imperfect. Societies are imperfect, and even we do our even if we do our best, and most of us are not doing our best most of the time. There is a tension, and there is something about us that gets lost, that gets elided, that gets repressed, and that doesn't even necessarily mean that we should not have it repressed. Like I think there's some things that very much should be repressed, and yet something that art can do, I think very well, is provide a sense of the individual, of a kind of recognition of the full reality of our individual complexity, even the parts of it that just cannot be part of shared public discourse. And I find that beautiful. And I think reading Bataille helped me find beauty in transgression.
But
So you're just roughly speaking, just to see if I understand you, there should be a rule against regicides in
Yes.
society. We shouldn't allow people to kill the king. But in art, there should be the freedom to describe regicide, to dwell in the gruesomeness of killing the regicide, but also just to like fantasize maybe about killing the king.
why should though, Santi? Like, what's the should in art? Like, who's
No. Okay. Good point. Good point. I'm not saying there should, but well, I think Tara is saying should though because she does speak in normative terms. But like, it's good. Let's just say that it's useful or that it's preferable that we give space to artists to indulge in things that in society in general we do not want them to actually do.
Um, Mostly. So I'm not even sure I would go that far, which is to say, I think it is possible to look at a transgressive work of art, a horrible depiction of something, and find this tension in it and find it beautiful, humanistic, good. And yet but that doesn't necessarily mean that like if I were, I don't know, commissioning something would think this is worth commissioning. I don't think that we should like actively encourage transgressive art. I think we kind of should accept that the existence of transgressive art is part of the richness of humanity.
Yeah, well, here's what I'd push at. Santi, I think brought the good point up, right? Like, I think we can agree that whatever Kanye is doing is bullshit. Like, that's not. It's just, I mean, insofar as it's transgressing, it's nothing. It falls closer to the line of this transgression is marketing that you started off talking about. But just the I guess the thing that you just said, Tara, made me think, like commissioning. I think if you're commissioning transgression, you're already probably not getting the right thing because you're going to get someone to try and transgress because like I'm gonna let me and that's maybe where I feel uncomfortable about your looking at this stuff. I mean, I think you're opposed at looking at this stuff as from a critical eye. How do we criticize and talk about transgressive art? That makes plenty of sense to me. But still, the experience of it doesn't feel quite right because the thing about Georges Bataille is that he's not exactly a scholar. He's kind of a like a visionary, a mystic, kind of like a demented priest, in all sorts of ways. I mean, and the journal that he founds, Asafal, which means I think like headless, right? And all of this stuff and the essays he's writing, he's demented in some important way. And the other essay. Now I'm thinking back on all this. The three essays, works that like I just find as in the transgression like sphere that for me were just so big. Like I said, Story of the Eye, the opening to Discipline and Punish, and then the third one is Yukio Mishima's Patriotism short story. I don't know if you guys ever read that one.
No.
That one is just I mean, it really gets at something else that we're talking about because it's Yukio Mishima is a conservative. He is a traditionalist like nothing else. Also happens to be gay, but irrelevant. He writes a story about a samurai coming back to his wife, and he has been ordered by the emperor to hunt down his best friend who had started a rebellion against the emperor. And he comes back, I think, from the first chase of trying to hunt down his friends, says to his wife, I have an irreconcilable problem on my hands. I am loyal. I've sworn loyalty to the emperor, and I will maintain that loyalty. But this is my friend, and I have also incredible loyalty towards him, and I cannot go hunt him. So therefore, I must kill myself, and I will commit seppuku. And then the story is kind of like the beginning of Discipline Punished, just one of the most atrocious, slow, like 30 pages description of him disemboweling himself. And, you know, the sword moving up his entrails, blood pouring out, guts coming on his lap. And his wife also kills herself at the end, as, you know, it's just... And it's worth pointing out that Mishima himself ended up killing himself exactly that same way after his own failed coup didn't happen. Anyway, the point there is that these people, these artists, the true transgressive works, if you will, for me, have something to do, again, less with, let's analyze these as art within the larger canon of art, and what does it tell us about society and all the rest of it. And really, it is about, like, what's successful for me is if it throws you so completely beyond the lines of what these are. And sure, in doing so, it helps you like look over your shoulder and see, oh, there's that line behind me, and oh, that's a line of society, and maybe it's arbitrary, as you were saying, and, you know, we need to ponder whether it's arbitrary, fallenness of society, fallenness of man, all the rest of this. But the real power of it is that it just throws you over it into that, like, visionary, ecstatic moment, and that ecstasy has a lot to do with death, with danger, with and you know, and you and I were chatting right before we started recording, Tara. Like, there's a temptation here to nihilism as well, but I think the true transgressive moment, etc., it's not nihilistic, it's ecstatic, and it's the difference between ecstasy and nihilism. That distinction is important, I think, and it's the if you're able to achieve the ecstatic. And by the ecstatic, it really is destructive of order. Absolutely that, like, of existing order. It levels it. That's super important. And I think that's where the value comes, at least for me as a consumer of this sort of stuff.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think this is something that maybe like the Christian ecstatic and I won't say nihilistic ecstatic, but like Dionysian ecstatic experience have in common, which is this recognition that the orders we have available to us are insufficient. And it is like I don't know if it's fair to say a moral concern from a not from a sort of the nihilist perspective, but it is some kind of concern that as a human being, a thing that one ought to do to reach one's humanness is to be awake to the insufficiency of the societal created order. And I think that the Christian version of this, or at least like my personal Christian version of this, is like the kind of carnivalesque, the destructive, it is an opportunity for expansion, not just in the sense of like we can envision a better world and go build it, but in a, there are more things in heaven and earth Horatio sense, that we are not limited to what we can presently conceive of. And I think that the thing that separates what we can presently conceive of and what it might be outside that frame, be it future life or kind of hypotheticals, is the imagination. And I think that's what's so kind of terrifying and ecstatic and wonderful about, and sometimes terrible.
So it does have a positive social function.
I mean, you could. I think one of the
it makes us aware of the
is a positive social function.
Right.
But I don't
it's
think
obviously not what the transgressive artist is thinking about when he's doing what he's doing. But in retrospect, you can say, for example, it's good that Flaubert wrote a lot about adultery because it made us more compassionate towards people in Madame Bovary's position.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I think Anna Karenina is a really good example of that. I mean, I think Anna Karenina is a really good novel about that kind of transgression, about the limitations of what is socially possible, and yet there's something else. Much more than Madame Bovary, I would say. But
so you're sort of establishing a way, like a criterion for judging transgression in art, and it's a moral criterion.
I wouldn't. I think it's a
Like
moral critique
I
and
think
an aesthetic
Damir's
criterion.
description. I think well, I think Damir's description is really good and apt when he says that it's not nihilistic. It's a moment of
Mhm.
ecstasy that, not because it wants to, but just by its own nature, threatens the established order. Um,
So I
for
think I
example,
agree with Damir.
right, but in so doing and challenging the order, it seems to be that seems to be a good thing in your eyes, Tara, because the established order is always, no matter as good as it can be, it's always going to be insufficient because human beings are just way too diverse and weird. So it's good that we have transgressive artists that test the limits from now and then.
I mean, Tara,
But then
yes, but hold
retroactively, you
on.
have to go and decide, was this a good one or a bad
I
one?
mean, but Tara, say a little. There was something else in your essay I think was really good. Maybe you can expand it a little bit to answer Santi there. It's that human order is necessarily human and therefore fallen and incomplete. So, like, I mean, if you want to really do the take the religious frame to it, is to say that human order is not divine order, and therefore any transgressive art delimits the doesn't necessarily delimit where human order is too restrictive, but it just points to has us ponder that human order is imperfect, right? Like
Yeah,
that's yeah.
absolutely. I think it's you become aware of the limitations of human order, and I think you enter. And I really like your description, Demir, of that ecstatic space, an ecstatic space that's also kind of it is a kind of you're lighting your own imagination on fire, and your imagination can kind of take you into any direction, either direction, uh, in a way that is a quintessentially human experience where, yes, the most intense thing and perhaps even the most intense best thing can come through. And so if I want to sort of push back at Santi, it's not because I don't think transgression can have a positive social function. It's that I don't think that reducing the kind of opening up that I'm talking about to like the pragmatic social effects is the
Hmm.
totality of what I want to say that transgression can do positively. Like, yes, I think transgression can do that. It can open up our imagination to imagine a better society in this way or that way. But it can also just make us conscious of this sort of field of human, like it makes us conscious of the magnificence of human imagination and the terror of human imagination and kind of makes us more in touch with our humanity that way.
But doesn't Kanye's song do that? Make you like the terror of this guy's imagination? I mean, we're all terrified by the song.
I will say that like the fact of Kanye's schizophrenia or whatever the hell he has is artistically significant if you want to put it that way. It's because he's clearly a madman and he's just like throwing a bunch of stuff out there that does put you in an ecstatic sort of mode. I think this particular song is kind of juvenile, and the sort of social moment it's creating gets at again this kind of like marketing thing that I sort of want to get back to again the current moment, because I think we've slipped back into talking about what the what transgression can and should, and when it's good and what it does. But I want to sort of maybe nudge us back into talking about today, and I think that's maybe makes it a little more grounded and relevant to people. I want to get back to this question of marketing versus politics and transgression, maybe, because I will say that my intuition about why Trump and Trumpism is so compelling is that the resentments are authentic, and that resentment is what's fueling things and giving it energy. And that resentment has a lot of transgression in it. Like resentment means like going against these sorts of things. But that again, I want to just push on this. There's something authentic about it in politics, and I take your point about D'Annunzio that you made earlier, Tara. But there's something authentic about it in politics that in the New York sphere of like alt right art, whatever, just seems more play acting to me. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's the same thing. But there's something about the fact that here in DC there was a kind of truculent, spittle flecked, bloody joy at taking a bunch of civil servants and throwing them out on the street. If you go and read Russ Vaught's like speeches that he gave, he's the head of the Congressional Budget Office now. He's one of the main Jacobins in this administration. You can see his glee at the idea of making civil servants suffer, making them hate themselves so much that they don't come to work. He said that in one speech, I believe. Like it's all out there. And I think that motivates people in a very fundamental way. There's a kind of physical cruelty there that whatever strutting of the Valkyries and like whatever the hell goes on in Brooklyn and at these like Sov House parties is whatever the hell that is. It's not important in a way that like people in power looking to extract revenge. There's something real in that transgression. Again, just like to use the language that like art transgression, whatever the fuck's going on in New York is unimportant. Whatever Kanye is doing is unimportant. I want to just push on that a little bit as a thing. And for me, when we talk about the transgressive moment today, it's the fact that there are people in power who are like just overjoyed at the physical dismantling of a lot of stuff that's going on right now. And I think it's important for me anyway, it's something that I keep sort of like brooding over. And I'll be perfectly honest, and I've written about it as well. There's a real allure to it. There's a real allure to this moment of Trumpism of dismantling a bunch of rotten shit. And it's not just intellectual. It is an emotional kind of, like I can taste it and it makes me giddy. I'm not pretending a little bit about this. It's not good for in any sort of moral sense, but it is alluring. It is, and it's all of these sorts of.
I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about is not like transgressive art as a category as much as a kind of like Dionysian destruction. That this is a like something that is ritualistic almost, that is maybe even religious. That what interests you is less the artistic side, which is I think where we started, and more in the sense of, what it has in common is the like imaginative destruction of order. And there's the sort of artistic version which plays with it by virtue of being in dialogue with like a medium that exists. Like a book can't burn itself, even a transgressive book can't burn itself, and yet what the kind of participatory thing that you're talking about, I think probably does tap into the same imaginative capacity for destruction, and probably speaks to the fact that there is a, deeply human yearning towards like maybe a way to bridge the two is to say that we have a yearning towards the destruction of order, that both transgressive art and transgressive ritual in different ways get at. One of them, I think, has a clearer moral purpose than the other, with my moralist hat on. But I think you're right that might be a way in which this moment is truly transgressive rather than like transgressive TM.
I think, Damir, that you're putting the distinction in the wrong place. The distinction is not between New York political transgression and DC actual transgression of the bureaucracy. It's between the vanguard and the majority of Trump voters that maybe had vaguely transgressive thoughts about, throwing the bums out, draining the swamp, voted for Trump, tuned out from politics like the vast majority of Americans do, and I don't blame them for it. And the vanguard, which is both in DC and New York, I think they feed off each other. I think that because a lot of the people working in DC, they read the work of the cultural side of the right-wing vanguard. They read Bronze Age Pervert. They listen to the podcasts. I mean, there's reporting on James Pogue about this stuff. So really, it feeds off of the culture and the political side feed off each other in the vanguard. Just like in the 60s, there was a link between the radical politics and the music that was going on. So I think those things are more united than you might give it credit for.
I guess. I mean, this is always I tend to deprecate the importance of ideas in all sorts of things. That's my sort of baseline. But I mean, I guess fair enough. I would just say that, how do I put it? it's uh, it's the distinction that Tara was making earlier about it marketing versus art, I guess, is the thing. And I maybe I'm just biased against sort of, I don't know, the New York art scene, that I don't find this new stuff to be anything more than try hard. And maybe this is just the jadedness of old age, that like, you know, when the kids in New York in the 80s were doing like weird musical shit, when like, you know, like the wild like noise experiments of like guys like J.G. Thirlwell called Fetus, and like, you know, the weird like crazy ass demented movies of like R. Kern. This stuff I was feasting on back then. I guess what I'm saying is like, you know, what was interesting about that to me then is it never assumed an audience. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a kind of, and again, it just nudges towards this kind of more purely ecstatic moment versus today's art stuff is always seems somehow performative. Now everything's a performance, everything's like an audience is found for it, but there was
Right. Music is literally performance, right?
well, again, like
Which is
that's
what
the
you're
thing
talking
about. Well, I mean, like Thirlwell, I guess he played at CBGB's a few times, but I don't know. The stuff just basically appeared, I think, you know, on records. There was a scene, obviously, stuff like percolated around it.
But do you think if that scene, which by the way, Damir undersells how much of an artist he is, a transgressive artist himself,
Yeah, well,
because
thank
in the
you.
90s he was in the punk scene in Baltimore.
Right.
He's wearing right now a
Wait,
hat
is that
about-
real? Is that true?
Yes,
band,
Damir's
yeah.
a transgressive artist. He has tinnitus to prove it,
I do have
and he's wearing a hat of a band called
What was
Air
your
that I've never
tell
heard
us
about.
about your band, Damir?
Hold on, but you see the shirt? That's Shellac. It's Steve Albini's band as
Shellac.
well.
Oh,
Yeah.
very artistic.
Look.
No, but just to close off my thought,
Yeah.
and then Tara, keep pressing Damir on talking about his experience. Do you think if those guys in that moment smelled political influence, the possibility of it, they would have been a lot more. They would have behaved differently. They would have behaved more like the artists now. Which, yeah, granted, they're not as good. I'll grant you that. But just like the thing now is that all of a sudden these people feel like they have possibility of political influence, and who doesn't want that?
you know, maybe that's part of it,
And that's
too.
why they become a little bit more cringe, maybe.
Well, maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's a good way to think about it, because what's interesting about the '80s, right, is that especially like a lot of the music stuff. I mean, all hated Reagan. Reagan was just, you know, was a kind of like negative patron saint of a lot of that stuff, because you know, that all of that was just so worth reacting to, and then just like throwing everything at and transgressing against. And it's funny to me that, you know, it's sort of like an ongoing joke between most people who really did love music back then, is like, okay, so you had 4 years of Trump even before this time. Why was there not a flowering of great, like, you know, countercultural stuff back then? I mean, I guess there was. I guess that's the what we're seeing right now in its ascendancy, as you're saying, Santi, that it's tasted political power, and like, you know, and that was what the woke moment was like a reaction to 4 years of Trump. I don't know. It feels that maybe that's what you're getting at is right, that this stuff was so politically marginal that it could devote itself more to pure ecstatic transgression rather than having this sort of performative and influence aspect, because it was influencing no one except, again, like just a bunch of other people who were into this weird shit and who were into the sort of the reality of the ecstasy rather than the impacts on anything broader. Maybe that's right. And so the cringe is just the fact that these people think they're politically relevant. And I think what I'm getting at is that the what is compelling about the moment is not that, like, who influences Trump. It's the fact that Trump is the destructor. And that gets back to what you're saying, Tara, that, like, you know, but I mean, it gets back to what also I was saying about the distinction between transgression as art form and studying it as that versus the experience of consuming it, which is, again, the carnival, that's sort of like, the reordering, the chaos, and all the rest of that. I guess I just prioritize that latter thing a lot more than any sort of political implications of it and I don't know, the rest of it.
I guess I think it's vital to draw a distinction between the hunger for transgression as something that is just like a human phenomenon that is instantiated in kind of ritualistic destruction, where the fact that it's vis-a-vis political power sort of shapes the contours of it.
That's it for part one, dear listeners. There's a lot more where that came from. If you're not yet a paying subscriber, please head on over to wisdomofcrowds.live and become one. Help support our work. Hope to see you in the bonus.